Mike Barnicle, right? Mike Barnicle is that stuck-up, snobby guy who asked the Aleppo question that Gary Johnson didn't know the answer to, and he wrote a column right afterwards, so he's capitalizing on this. He's all over the place. He worked for the Globe, he worked for the Boston Herald or columnist, and I don't know, Daily News or something, I don't know. But he's actually been getting into a lot of trouble, and I'm going to give you a link to, one of the 25 years list of trouble. But I just want to focus on one part of what he plagiarized, right? He's a columnist, he's supposed to be telling the truth, and he's a plagiarizer, he's a liar. He copied George Carlin's Brain Droppings book. He read George Carlin's Brain Droppings, and then he takes the jokes and he puts them into his own column and makes it look like it's his own jokes. And I'll even show you some more. So essentially this guy's a conservative. He makes fun of liberals, right? So if you're making fun of liberals, then you're a conservative. And he's going to vote for Trump. And so the reason why Mike Barnicle would want to try to humiliate Gary Johnson, because Gary Johnson is going to take much-needed votes away from Trump. And since it's going to be a close election, that puts Jill Stein and Gary Johnson right in play. Even if at the very least it's to nadir the vote, and at the very most it's to fucking win, right? You got your fingertips on the ledge, now just pull yourself up and now you can become president. That's why this Barnicle, fucking Mike Barnicle. Okay, so I'm going to read you the lines that Mike Barnicle said, and then I'm going to read you the George Carlin lines, and you tell me if it's plagiarized or not, okay? So Mike Barnicle, he writes, "Someday I'd love to see the Pope appear on his balcony and announce the baseball scores." So that's kind of funny, right? The Pope comes out on the balcony instead of praying to God and shit. He just says, "Hey, the Mets won." It's baseball. Baseball's kind of... Anyways, George Carlin says, "Someday I want to see the Pope come out on that balcony and give football scores." So that's what Mike Barnicle, and he got like $200,000 to write a fucking, this column every week. $200,000 per year to plagiarize bullshit from George Carlin's book. And, okay, so that's one, right? It's pretty clear, almost word for word. I want to see, someday I'd love to see, appear on the balcony, come out on that balcony, announce baseball scores, give the football scores. So it seems like the only thing he changed was baseball to football. All right, here's another quote. There's about 10 of these. He listed 10 of them, and I've only been able to find 3 of them. But, okay, so Mike Barnicle, "I hate it when the person ahead of me in the 12 items or less line decides to pay for a pack of Tic Tacs by writing a check." Mike Barnicle, man, he comes up with some zingers, don't he? And George Carlin says, "Here's something I can do without. People ahead of me on the supermarket line who are paying for an inexpensive item by credit card or personal check. People, take my word for this. Tic Tacs is not a major purchase." Right? Tic Tacs, paying by a credit card or a personal check. Like, oh my God, why are you using a check or a credit card for a pack of Tic Tacs? He says, "I hate it when a person ahead of me in 12 items or less line decides to pay for a pack of Tic Tacs by writing a check." So there's 2 jokes, right? George Carlin would give him a copy of Brain Droppings and says, "Here, we'll just eliminate the middleman. You don't need to." This is hilarious. And, so that's 2 jokes. Here's another joke, okay? He says, here's George Carlin. George Carlin says, "I read that a Detroit man and his friend were arrested because they forced the man's 5-year-old son to smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol, and perform oral sex on them. Can you imagine? Cigarettes!" And so that joke is sitting there like he's pretending that the pedophilia and the alcohol, giving a child alcohol, those weren't anything, but the cigarettes was the worst thing there. Clearly they're all bad, but he's a comedian, right? Mike Barnicle, he changes it. When liberals are told that a couple has been sentenced to jail for forcing a 7-year-old to smoke cigarettes, drink liquor, and have sex with an adult for money, they say, "Cigarettes, that's awful." So he turned a joke into something that this is what liberals believe. The only thing that they don't like was the cigarettes part, not the pedophilia and not the giving a 7-year-old alcohol. Those 2 things are perfectly fine and dandy. It's the cigarettes that liberals have a problem with. Where the fuck would he get something like that? How the fuck could he just write some shit like that? And he's making fun of liberals. So this is a Donald Trump supporter. This is a right-wing conservative. And I've read in lots of these different articles that he takes his column, and it's, you know, this is like inside the Beltway shit. Nobody's paying attention to any of this. But he attacks his enemies and he defends his friends, and then for the most of the public, nobody's even paying attention to any of the fucking bullshit that he's saying. So he got suspended for 2 months over that, and then there's some other things about a fabrication of a tear-jerking story about 2 kids, one black, one white. They became friends when they were both hospitalized with cancer, and it turns out he made that up, or he said that a nurse said something about it, but she said that the details were wrong. I don't know. Check out the link that I sent below. It's got 25 years of trouble. Here's a couple things that's listed. In 1973, he quotes a Roxbury gas station owner calling his black neighbors niggers. The judge rules that Barnicle had made it up, and the Globe has to pay $40,000. So $40,000. They got sued, and now he has to pay $40,000. I guess for like libel laws or some shit. Right? It's the Globe, so it's a publication, and he could have been, you know, telling the truth on all these. It's just like, well, maybe he could have been telling the truth. Who knows? Right? One person writes one, you know, bunch of crap, another person writes another bunch of crap. Really, it comes down to, did you record it? Do you have any hard evidence that this was said? There's a Christmas Eve column that steals from a Jimmy Cannon classic. There's James Stewart jumps to his death. Barnicle writes columns exonerating the police for their false arrest. Stewart taking out a big insurance policy on a soon-to-be wife. Years later, the Globe admits it shouldn't have backed him up. Dershowitz, Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, says he loves Asian women because they're so submissive, and then Dershowitz blows a gasket, and then they pay a $75,000 out-of-court settlement. So apparently libel is taken pretty serious. It just makes me think about that principal in Cloverport, man. He fucked with me. He started a fight. And I said, okay, you want to fight, let's step outside. And then I got arrested, or I got a warrant, and I had to go through court. I had to go through all this fucking bullshit. And he talked to the newspapers. I'm running for lieutenant governor at the time. He tells newspapers like 4 or 5 different quotes. So he's a liar. He's telling all these different lies to all these different newspapers, and that's libel. And so I just feel like I was on my A game if I just, you know, I don't know. I feel like I've been bullied my whole life. And I'm starting to learn to stand up for myself. And maybe I don't know, maybe I did get a little bit pissed off because I was like, yeah, I would have kicked your fucking ass if you would have came out there. But he was being rude, he's lying to me, he's standing over me, acting like he's going to, you know, dominating over me. You need to get the hell out of here. Well, you need to not lie. You need to give a shit about civics and democracy and about, you know, whether or not your students succeed in life. But they don't give a shit. He does not give a shit. Roger Keith Haynes, Cloverport, Kentucky. Check it out. But he says that, you know, he doesn't care. It's all about his power, his money, and as long as he gets his paycheck, he don't give a shit about whether there's democratic practices in the class or whether those students know anything about civics. He's not trying to empower and liberate. He's trying to oppress and, you know, allow his tyrannical ambitions to, you know, go through. And so that's he's a sick fucker. He's a sick backwards fucker. But he's the one that started a fight. I defended myself, and like an oppressor, he's got to keep coming and keep coming. So he's lying to the fucking press, doing this, doing that. And he was the one that clearly you know, I should have felt threatened by him because once it was only a 30-second argument, he calls my school. I get kicked out of school, so there's, you know, $10,000, $20,000 down the drain. He files charges, gets a warrant out for my arrest. I have to go through a big old fucking public trial with a jury and with this guy and that guy and everybody else. And then after that, you know, then I got abuse of a teacher. He's not a teacher, and I didn't abuse him. So anyways, there was a libel case that I could have gone after with him, but I didn't. And so it's just like, man, why don't people tell me to defend myself? Why don't people tell me to sue these people that are fucking with my reputation and my name? These are libel laws, so that means I could have, you know, sued the shit out of him and actually got some fucking money out of it. And it would have defended my name. You can't just run around, you know, lying to different people about my name, about my fucking reputation, and I'm just going to allow you to get away with that shit. Anyways, that's what these 2 cases triggered me to think about there. The outraged landlord whom Barnicle said he couldn't contract. Okay, so just check those out. Those are different ones. He gets $200,000. Oh, yeah, and there's one more thing I want to mention about this Mike Barnicle. His wife is of the Bank of America. Anne Finucane. It's of the Bank of America. She's the chief marketing officer. So his wife works for the Bank of America. So we're talking about big corporation and media, marrying. He had to stop because he was caught plagiarizing and fabricating. Here's another good point. So they asked him, this looks like these lines came from a George Carlin book. And he says, I've never read the George Carlin book. I've never seen the George Carlin book. The jokes that I got was from a bartender and from friends. I write them down on on napkins and on note cards, and that's just what I do. So he goes into, he lies. He lies. Eventually, we find out that he did read George Carlin, and he said it on TV. Here's the book of the month or some shit. Read George Carlin Brain Droppings. So he did know about the book. He did read it. He owned a copy. And then when someone said that he copied out of the book, he pretended like he didn't even read the book. So he's a fucking liar. He's lying through his teeth, and he felt no shame about it. So it says he recommended Carlin's book to viewers on June 22nd. There's recommended 17 books in the station's Chronicle program, WCVB-TV. He recommended 17 books as summer reading, among them Brain Droppings, which he said had a yuck on every page. So that's Brain Droppings, right? I mean, this is, he clearly fucking lied. He clearly fucking copied and plagiarized. And then when they, called his ass out on it, he says, oh, no, I didn't. And then once they called his ass out on it and he's, they're thinking about firing him, there were some big, high-profile people that intervened on his behalf. You had a top fleet bank executive. Let's see, Barnicle, his wife. They live amongst the rich, super exclusive suburb of Lincoln. Summer with the Hyannis Port. Social set, Hobnob. This is BostonPhoenix.com. Business elite of Boston and Cambridge. After he refused to resign, there was a distinct whiff of advertiser pressure in the form of a letter from Staples CEO Tom Stemberg, in which he threatened to yank his major advertising deal. There's also well-informed speculation that Jack Connors, head of the Hill Holiday Advertising Agency, one of Boston's most influential business leaders, may have intervened from Barnicle's behalf. So Mike Barnicle, anybody who watched that interview, and just because you hate Gary Johnson, just because you picked fucking Hillary or fucking Trump, who's going to escalate the war in Syria and fuck that situation up, Trump said just leave it all, let them all kill each other, but he also said steal the oil. So there's oil there, so is he going to steal the oil or just leave it be? You have no idea what the fuck Trump is going to do. So don't pretend like, well, the Trump doctrine is this. There is no Trump doctrine. The Clinton doctrine, Hillary Clinton doctrine, is the Kissinger doctrine, the Nixon doctrine of empire. So if anything, it might be, does she believe in preemptive strikes or does she believe in, detente, so, just containing, the big fucking emerging nations. So that would be the argument there, not whether or not she's an imperialist. Of course she's an imperialist. Of course Trump is going to be an imperialist. He loves power. He's an authoritarian asshole. He's a fascist. He loves Mein Kampf, and he speaks like Hitler does when it comes to the propaganda, like the way Hitler wrote about propaganda. So Jill Stein and Gary Johnson would be the only ones that's against war. So when it comes to Syria, just because you knew a city in Syria, which even the New York Times they said it was the capital of ISIS, they thought it was Damascus, and then they thought it was Baka or some other fucking city. So, people might have heard the city, but what are you supposed to know? Every city in every fucking country? And yeah, he didn't know about it. But to be so arrogant, to be so elitist, and so stuck up and snobbish, well, I knew a fact that you didn't know. I mean, I already mentioned all this stuff, but it was fucking bullshit. And now it turns out that, everybody that identified with Mike Barnicle, this guy's a liar, this guy steals shit from George Carlin, he's making fun of liberals, so he's a right-wing fucking lying, plagiarizing, low-life piece of shit. That's who Mike Barnicle is. Mike Barnicle's a bad fucking guy. I don't know why because he's got wealthy friends, because his fucking wife is part of the marketing team or whatever for the Bank of America. So he's got connections in high places. That's why he's, allowed to pal around with all these media fucking assholes. And then once they called his ass out on it, he said, no, I've never read George Carlin. Never in my life have I ever read George Carlin. It was from the guy. So he lies. He lied to cover up his lie. And he's a journalist. We're supposed to trust his word. That's the thing, is we got to trust your word. Just because you've been on all these different shows, just because you were able to fool the fucking talk show host, doesn't mean that I'm going to be fooled. And anybody at home shouldn't be fooled by this lying, plagiarizing piece of shit. I'd rather have George Carlin. I wish George Carlin was here today. And Mike Barnicle, I wish he would go into retirement. So, you know, for him to sit there and mock and laugh at George Carlin and say that his jokes are literally the feelings of liberals, which is clearly not true. He was making a fucking joke. The reason why that joke works is because all three of those things are wrong. So George Carlin isn't a liberal that's in favor of pedophilia and alcohol for children. He is against all of those things. That's what that joke implied. But he turned it around and said liberals, and I wonder if he meant liberals as in George Carlin, and all of his followers and believers believe him like he's a god or like some sort of saint. If that's the way he meant it, then he was, you know, wasn't making a joke, but he was mocking and making fun of liberals, and here's a quote from a liberal. One liberal, he said, liberal rules. So again, he's using this column to attack his enemies and to defend his friends. He don't care if he's a liar. And then I'll make this one last point. He, in his defense, he sits there and talks about how he has, you know, yeah, he fucked up with this one column, but not as bad as somebody else did when it came to Laos. Now, there was some chemical nerve agent or some shit 20 years ago, CNN or somebody got into trouble because they said that there was some chemical thing or something about Laos. And I just recently heard that Obama is pledging $90 million. This is secular talk. But he pledges $90 million to Laos after a secret U.S. war decimated it. So, you know, 20, 30 years ago, there was supposed to be something about the U.S. government drops, you know, chemical weapons or drops some weapons, and then they retracted the story. Well, why is that? Because U.S. officials and the arms manufacturers put pressure on them to delete the fucking thing. So he compared his thing to it. Oops, I just fucked up, but it was just about jokes and who gives a shit. It's not like it was real news. It's not like, you know, I just made up real news. Meanwhile, this organization just made up real news, and then everybody thought it was true. Well, it turns out that that was true. Those, you know, supposed made-up fucking things was true. There's Laos. We've had a secret war with Laos, and now we're having to pay $90 million. It makes it look like Obama's just, you know, chipping in. Hey, Laos, here's $90 million just for the fuck of it. Well, it was because we've been in Laos and we've been fucking their shit up. So maybe we should have listened to, you know, the CNN people and not to this fucking Mike Barnicle. Fuck Mike Barnicle. I just don't see, I mean, and fuck everybody that followed Mike Barnicle. The fact that you would defend Mike Barnicle over Gary Johnson, it says one of two things. Either you're a Mike Barnicle yourself, a lying, plagiarizing, low-life piece of shit who just wants to make up shit and go after your enemies and defend your friends because you have no standards or principles and you just want to, you know, it's just a big quest of fucking NFL, you know, sort of boxing match, do whatever it takes, right, to win and succeed, and it doesn't matter who you take out. Or you don't like Gary Johnson because you picked another fucking candidate. And both of those, you know, for a journalist, both of those answers aren't good enough for me. If you think, I mean, if you sided with Mike Barnicle, which a lot of people did, a lot of people saw that clip and they went ahead and, passed it along and copied it. And they're like, oh, Gary Johnson's campaign is over. It's dead. It's gone. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It's easier to judge than it is to think. And, you know, when just, I could imagine myself being in Gary Johnson's situation, and it's like we ignore the media. They're supposed to be invisible, but Mike Barnicle shouldn't be invisible. Nobody should be invisible. I mean, if I sat there and act all fucking, well, so what is the Bretton Woods system? What do you think about the SDRs and the renminbi joining in the global currency system? You don't know about that? Oh, man, that's so schadenfreude. Do you know what the word schadenfreude is? Really? You don't know the word schadenfreude? And then he was like, Aleppo. The whole question was, if you were president, what would you do about Aleppo? Aleppo? Aleppo. Could you fucking explain yourself, you low-life piece of shit? What about Aleppo? Syria? He understands. He's got a perspective about Syria. But Aleppo, tell me what you're going to do about, you know, I've already made my jokes about this. So, there's a city in Bolivia, and I forgot it already. Pandora. But what are you going to do with the Pandora situation? Fuck! Alright, I'll memorize that Bolivia city, too, because that was a 70, they could have, you know, they killed the ministry, internal ministry, because they're, the unions, the cooperative unions, wanted to sign their own contracts with the multinational corporations, and the government wanted to intervene on their behalf. but the unions didn't want it, and so they kidnapped the deputy interior minister, the deputy, so number 2, and the government wanted to go get their man who was kidnapped, and eventually they killed like 5 of the miners, but they, the deputy internal minister wound up getting killed himself. And they said that that could have been a really big bloodbath. That could have been really huge and really fucked up. So, yeah, I mean, that shows how strong the labor movement is in Bolivia, and it also shows that sometimes it's actually they're so strong that they become corrupt, right? They're so strong that they're kidnapping public officials and executing them in order to get their way. And so, I mean, I guess you'd have to actually look in the details a little bit more. So is it a fair bargain? Is it a square deal? Or is the government actually trying to get a, you know, a piece of the pie that they don't deserve? And, you know, murder is wrong, kidnapping is wrong, but if it's that's, you know, that aside, what's instigated it, right? So that matters. Murder is wrong, so fuck them for doing that shit, but was the contract bad? So, I mean, it's just like, we live in 2 different fucking worlds. That conversation never happens in America. The union was so damn strong, and they said, no, the government wants to help mitigate it. No, we don't even want the government around because our union is so strong, we don't even need the government to make sure we have a square deal. We can negotiate a strong deal by our goddamn selves, by ourselves. We don't need the government involved. That is amazing. I could not unionize a fucking McDonald's or an Arby's or a Walmart without the government being involved. And that's why it doesn't get done. And anyways, yeah, so Laos, that story turned out to be true, and his column was, you know, George Carlin is gone, and now we got fucking Mike Barnicle making fun of libertarian candidates and third parties, acting like they're second-class citizens when we need the best damn discussion. We need the best ideas, and the great pool of ideas, the best ideas should prevail. And just because y'all want to pick TYT, y'all picked what, Hillary? Y'all going with Hillary? Is that who you're picking? In a safe state of California, you're picking Hillary? Okay, you dumb motherfuckers, fine. Y'all want to go with your girl, you know, your Goldwater girl? But then you're going to hate on any of these independents? No, I feel the same way about Jill Stein. They both deserve to be in the debate. You want to sit there and nitpick, and that's the only time that you recover them is when they make a gaffe? Why don't we talk about their policy ideas? They're right about the wars of empire, the war, you know, the nonstop 15-year war, global war on terror. They're right about the war on drugs. They're right about personal freedoms. And Gary Johnson is just wrong when it comes to the economy. And that's where Jill Stein steps up. So, yeah. I want to have this actual conversation, and this is a good conversation. The militarization of the police, that's another place where both Gary Johnson and Jill Stein are right, and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are wrong. And if we're not going to have a real conversation, or y'all just want to play patty cake in the media and pretend like y'all fucking so goddamn smarter and you know every fucking thing, Rachel Maddow just admitted the other day, was like, well, I thought it was dumb for Donald Trump to be in Mississippi, or, yeah, and now Hillary Clinton is like inching her way almost there, and that should tell you something. Hillary Clinton is about to take Mississippi? Well, why would that be? Oh, maybe because she's the actual Republican, and he's not. He's a liberal Republican, and she's a conservative Democrat. She used to be a Republican, he used to be a Democrat. This is a stupid fucking game. This is dumb. I've already done this shit. Fuck the lesser of the 2 evils. I'm voting for the greater good. Jill Stein, 2016. Viva la Revolucion.